Let's get started. Thanks for joining us. As I said before, it's 12:01. Um, this is our fifth listening sessions. Uh, how to serve small businesses in today's challenging times is sort of how we've been billing it. Want to thank everybody for all the work that they're doing. And I know there's Zoom call after Zoom call after Zoom call. So thanks for coming on ours. Um, I am Heidi Pickman. I'm the VP for Programs and Policy at Cameo. In case you don't know me, I am going to tell you a little bit about today's Zoom tips, just in case we don't have anybody who's not a Zoom expert by now. Um, all your audios are muted, but you are able to mute and unmute yourself. That we don't have a huge, well, we're participant list. We are growing, so I don't know how many people are going to end up on the call, but we do want to encourage you to speak. To find the mute and unmute button, just look for the mic icon on the left. If you drag your cursor down to the bottom of your screen, that's where you'll find it. There's also a chat box where you could chat your questions into there. We are recording and we will post on our website as soon as we can, and we'll send you a link. You're free to share this with other colleagues. I'm also happy to share the slides, although there's not much to today's slides. It's more of kind of a conversation marker, but you can share them if you want. So just want to give a roundup of where Cameo's webinars are going for the next week. On Wednesday, it's going to be Earth Day. And what does that have to do with access to capital? We'll talk a little bit about that and then talk more generally about access to capital options on Wednesday at 1 p.m. And Melissa's going to do me a favor. I think she did already. She popped the link to that, to register for that, into the chat box. On Thursday, we'll talk about COVID-related employment issues, unemployment, the family leave, things like that. We have an HR professional joining us, and we're trying desperately to get someone from EDD on, although I'm not really sure that they have any excess capacity. It is all hands on deck there to process the unemployment claims. So that'll be Thursday at 1 o'clock. And then the following week, just to put on your radar, we'll be going over profit and loss statements on April 28th with Susan Brown, probably late afternoon. And just in case, we are sort of tentatively still planning to have our advocacy day in Sacramento on June 9th. That might be prime time to get some small business advocacy out there. We're still waiting to hear what's happening on the state level with the state legislative session. But since we haven't put any money out there, we haven't been too many resources out there yet, but we do have a location that's willing to work with us. So they've got that date, June 9th, held for us. So we've got it penciled in, and we'll keep you updated. And in case that we are going to go through with that, we'll have an advocacy webinar that third Thursday webinar series. And you can see all our webinars on our website, which I believe Melissa will also pop in to chat with us. I do believe I saw our DC people chime in. But before we go to them, I just thought I'd share with you, and I'll put this link into chat once I stop talking and introduce our people in DC. I wanted to give everybody an idea of what's been going on with the SBA PPP loans. This is the report that came out this week. Total, a little bit over 1 million loans were made for almost 248 billion. In California, it's about 55,000 loans for almost 21 billion. The overall loan size is 239,000. That's US wide. Top 3 industries were construction, professional, scientific, technical services, and manufacturing. I forgot to do introductions. So why don't we do this into chat just real quick to get a sense of who's here. Type your name, your org in the introduction, and if you have any clients who got PPP loans. If you didn't, just type type no, this is an off the cuff thing, type no for PPP loans, or type yes and how the number. So we'll give everybody a little bit of time to type their name, their organization, and a yes or a no if they have any clients who got PPP loans. I'm just curious, or know of any organizations. Just I'm doing this for advocacy purposes, just to see. So yes, and pending for my clients. If you did a yes, it'd be good to know, like put a number in there. That's great. So I might follow up with you and see how many applications you actually submitted. I did ask one of our lenders today, one of the lenders who got approved, whether or not they got any PPP loans. They collected and submitted, but by the time they had submitted their PPP loans, all the money had run out. So great. RSF Social Finance got 5. Yeah. Wow. Many still pending. Well, we'll talk a little bit about that in a second. So with that, I want to welcome everybody. Won't have a chance to say, but you guys can all see who's in the chat with you. I want to do a shout out to Jesse Torres of Arroyo West. He's chair of Cameo's board. Thanks for joining us, Jesse. And of course, Carolina, our CEO, is here. And all PACE, Unity Council, El Camino, TMC Community Capital, California Farm League, Meta. Thank you guys all for joining us. We really appreciate it. So now let's turn to what is going on in Washington with Ann Sullivan and Elizabeth Sullivan from Madison Services Groups. I'm gonna, Ann and Elizabeth, if you guys, do you have video? I think we'd rather see a person rather than, yeah, we do. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And Ann, take it away. You're on mute, Ann. So let me see what's going on here with you. I'm guessing you're 703.
Yes.
Yep, there you go.
Thank you. All right. Hello, everybody, and thank you, Cameo, for having me on the call. It looks like there's some breakthrough right now with the negotiations on what the final package for CARES 2 looks like. That's what everybody's calling that bill, CARES 2. The Minority Leader, Kevin McCarthy, in the House just indicated that he would support funding for hospitals, which was one of the big Democratic items. Everybody's on board for giving small businesses more money, so that's done. So I think there's breakthroughs, and there was some optimism that the final negotiations would end up maybe by Monday resuming. And so you might see a bill early next week. I don't think time is running out, but you never know, they're going to work through the weekend. So there will be a bill, and it just has taken longer than anybody would like. It has to be by unanimous consent because the houses of Congress are not actually physically in Washington. So absent a formal, being formally on the floors and casting their votes, they're remote, everybody has to agree to it. So while this is frustrating in terms of process, it's also bipartisanship at work, because nothing will pass if you don't work with the other party, as we saw last week in the Senate. So with that, I just say I've heard from lots and lots of people who need the loans, who got the loans, who are waiting on the advances. I agree, time's ticking away, but I'm optimistic that we'll see a package soon.
Ann, I have a question.
Yeah.
Do we know if the $1 billion for CDFIs is in the package?
We do not, although we know, I don't know what the amount is, but we know that that's one of the speaker's priorities, is to make sure that the non-bank lenders have access to the funds they need to help underserved communities.
Are you willing to
Ann,
entertain?
Ann, can I ask you a question?
Mm-hmm.
This is Mark Quinn. In addition
Hi,
to
Mark.
the PPP, hi, how are you? In addition to the PPP side, the thing that also concerns all of us is the EIDL side. Any idea if that is going to be augmented too?
Yes, that was the reason for the objection in the Senate by the Democrats last week, was that EIDL is also out of money. And the advances, they slowed down from an average of what was supposed to be $10,000 to like $1,000. And so that I feel pretty certain is going to be part of the package. I don't think there's any objection to including that.
So any idea, that amount of money, the EIDL side only got about $7 billion and then the $10 billion for the advance. Any idea how much? I've seen some numbers on that. You might have seen them from Cardin as well. Any idea how much they're going to augment that by? Because we know on the PPP side they're talking about 251 or something like that. But EIDL, right. I've seen numbers that are significantly higher.
I think there's general agreement that that was underfunded. And so I anticipate that that'll come in higher than it was initially.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
And there's a question in chat. Yeah. Did you want to say something else for that? There's a question asking if the president would call a special session of Congress if unanimous consent is not achieved. You want to talk a little bit? I think they're going back to work, right?
So in May, so first of all, even though the Congress is not in formal session, the Senate is always in pro forma session, which means that the president's recess appointments are thwarted. This is not unique to President Trump. This has happened for many, many, many administrations. President Obama was really frustrated with it and actually took it to the Supreme Court, where they told him, no, you cannot adjourn the Congress. You can't do that, but you can work with your friends in Congress to set up a situation where you'd have some control. I won't go into it. It's, constitutional. It's probably too wonky for you, but basically the Congress is working. They just don't have a formal mechanism right now to do off-site voting except for in a unanimous consent. Somebody asked Nancy Pelosi today in the press conference, what's being done about that, and she has committee recommendations. She tasked a couple of committee members with coming up with how could they do something and with a secure technology platform so that this doesn't happen again. So, they're working on it. The president can convene Congress, but again, the Senate is technically in session, even though it's pro forma session. So the answer to this question is no. The president cannot call a special session of Congress because their one house is already technically in.
All right. And then we have a question also wondering if farmers are going to be included in the EIDL program.
Well, I know that they, so now I don't remember. I've gone through too many iterations of this. I thought they were included in one of the first bills that I saw. I do not know, though, if they're going to be in the one going forward. Frankly, nobody really knows what's in the bill. I mean, all of our congressional people don't know except for the top negotiators. And yes, we don't get Nancy Pelosi on the phone. So I can't give you numbers.
Yeah. Brett, if you give me an ask for that or something like that, I can pass it on to Nancy Pelosi's office since we are officially in her district as the Cameo office.
Yeah, I just don't think at this time anybody knows, including the negotiators, so I think we just all have to be patient. But I do know that there have been a lot of requests for farmers to be included, and other agriculture-related folks. So I would not be surprised to see it included.
Yeah.
I do note that the Ag Department has its own set of
Supports.
loans,
Yeah.
has its own loans. And so it would logically go through that department rather than the SBA, but let's see what happens.
Yeah. Does anybody else have any questions for Anne? I should have prefaced this whole thing with, and I feel like I mentioned it, but not sure, but the PPP and the EIDL money, in case everybody doesn't know, I kind of assumed that everybody did know, is they are out of money. I kind of glossed over that. We'll talk with Mark a little bit about like what to do going forward, but does anybody have any questions for Anne, more questions about federal stuff, the way the process is working? Not sure. I think she might have told us everything she knows at this point, but unless there's some secret sauce, I know it's like you said.
No.
Heidi,
I'd love to. Go ahead.
Yeah, let me ask one
ahead.
question. I know one of the things that is on the agenda from Pelosi's side is that the small community banks and CDFIs were essentially kind of frozen out of the process for the PPP first round. And in addition, and probably more significantly, underserved markets and minority businesses have also been screened out for a variety of reasons. Any idea whether that's getting a different kind of hearing?
So that's been a priority of hers and Nydia Velazquez, who is the chair of the Small Business Committee in the House. Certainly, Senator Cardin on the Senate side, who is also a negotiator, cares deeply about that. He's from Maryland. And actually, Senator Rubio cares about that because Florida is not a, wealthy state, has a lot of small businesses, a lot of Hispanic businesses that are probably not banked the way the PPP treated it. So I think there's been kind of broad agreement that that effort needs to be ramped up.
Mm-hmm. And then one last question. A lot of the complaint that we all heard throughout is folks that went to banks, and if their bank was not doing PPP, they couldn't find another bank. If the banks that were doing it were mostly doing it for their own customers. Any idea whether there's been some thoughts around how to deal with the fact that some people are basically frozen out because their banks didn't do it and they can't find a bank that will do it because they only do it for their own customers?
Well, I know that the SBA and Treasury have urged people to expand beyond that, but I know personally a number of businesses who are exactly in that situation, who are very successful businesses, have banked, but just not banked with the banks that have been at the forefront of dispensing this money. So I think it's an issue that continues to hamper almost no matter what size of small business you are, because it's dependent on relationships. And I know that's been discussed, and I know that the SBA and Treasury are trying to change that. Mm-hmm. But I do want to say that I know some folks that have had the idea like, let me apply to PPP, even though it's out of money, let me just get in the queue. Their banks have not accepted their application.
Right.
So
getting
in the queue is a little tough. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that is one of the points of discussion about what to do next. Have you heard of anybody saying either that I know SBA on the EIDL side can't accept any applications for anti-deficiency reasons, but as far as the lenders are concerned, they will not accept any, even internally, as far as you understand?
At least a bank, what do I have? A sampling of about 5 banks maybe that I know of that have said no, but they're big, they're significant and they're big banks.
Mhm.
So I'd say that's what I know anecdotally.
Yeah, and just to give everybody perspective, there's about over 4,000 banks that made that $250 billion loan that I put up there before. I didn't put up the number of banks, so.
There was, this is Noah, the San Francisco district office, the SBA. We did release a report last night on some updated numbers for PPP, both broken out by lender and state, refresh numbers for where we were as of the ending of last night. And then for lenders who are taking applications, or well, not taking applications, basically we turned off a lender's ability to submit applications to eTran, which is the database that's used to process those applications. So they can't, a lender itself, even if they took an application, they couldn't send it into SBA, even if they wanted to.
Yeah. No, can you pop, is that report public? Can you pop it into chat, a link to that? That'd be great. So
Yeah.
people can take a look. And
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
Thanks. And then there's the obvious comment, my do the math comment, I like to say, is that there is some frustration. Will 250 billion be enough to really assist the country's remaining 30 million small businesses and industries that support local businesses? 1 to 50 employees, question mark. 246 billion when only to 1 million applicants. Business closures will be inevitable. I think we all kind of are, you know, going to see that. And one of the things that I feel like a broken record, but I heard somebody on the radio yesterday. I was listening. I listen to KCRW, even though it's a LA radio station, and I'm up here in San Francisco. I lived in LA for about 15 years, and one of the guests, it was a small business bookstore in Echo Park, said that they went to an online lender to get cash, and I'm just really worried about that. That's going to be the first thing that people do when they are in trouble, is that they want cash because it's easy and it's quick. It's a lot harder to look at your expenses, to try and figure out work share programs for your employees, or even, you know, lay people off, or think of other ways to improve your bottom line. It takes more time, it takes more thought. And that's one of my worries, is that our small businesses are going to go and go for some quick, easy cash, and that might make things worse. So I know everybody's out there on the call to just, you know, be aware of that and suggest that businesses can do some other things.
Heidi, that's something, I got a call yesterday from a group of minority businesses who are putting together a letter talking about predatory lending and some of the bad things that can go on as a result of desperation. And so it's something that Cameo will definitely want to sign on to. I don't have it yet, but it's there is a kind of a concerted effort to talk about that in terms of policy going forward.
Yeah, I mean, we're also in touch, you know, we're very close with the Responsible Business Lending Coalition, because they, you know, we work together on the California legislation. And I mean, one of my ideas would be, and I think there is some interest, there is some renewed interest in making it part of the responses to get something like the SB 1235, which was the transparency in lending bill that was passed in 2018 on a national level. So, which would be amazing. That would be a huge coup, because then we wouldn't have to fight state by state to get transparency legislation. And what happened in California, as everybody knows, we weren't able to get the exact thing that we needed into the bill. So the compromise was to have DBO, the Department of Business Oversight, come up with the regulations, and they have yet to still issue the regulations. So that we expect those to happen in sometime this year. But so that's that's also kind of something that Camille will be working on and with our friends, and Anne is going will help out, I'm sure. And that might.
Well, they're actually at the national level at the forefront of that effort.
Yeah.
So
good.
Before we lose Anne, one other quick question on the economic injury side. Have you heard anything about whether the grant loan, whatever we call the $10,000 advance, have you heard anything about whether that is intended to be added to again or reinstated or funded or just let go?
I think everybody's been pretty clear that to the Congress that they can't let that go, that that's an important lifeline that needs to continue to be funded. Now, whether they can, whether that ends up in the final package, but there's been a lot of small business organizations, small businesses, people just pounding on them saying, at the very minimum, you've got to get that done.
Yeah. Well, just judging from the $10 billion that would have covered about 1 million small businesses at 10,000, sort of my understanding is that we're somewhere north of 4 million EIDL applications. So we have 3 million plus or minus people who are in the queue that could be eligible for 10,000. That will be, we're already way underfunded there. So I haven't seen any coverage of that one. Separate from EIDL itself, those are numbers that are in the 50 billion range for the emergency advance and probably 200 for the EIDL. So those are numbers that are too big to be somehow missed in the coverage. I'm curious why that hasn't gotten any more coverage.
I guess I would just say that it was hard enough for me to keep everything straight, and so I'm thinking even harder for reporters to keep it straight about which is what. So it hasn't gotten as much publicity, but in the small business community, it certainly has. Everybody's screaming for it. So I'd be really surprised if it didn't make it.
Good.
And to Tim Lambert's point in the chat box, it would be an enormous amount of money to be able to satisfy the need now and also in the recovery phase. This isn't nearly enough. Whatever they do is not going to be nearly enough.
Well, Anne, thanks. We do have one more question in the chat and then I'll let you go, but I'm not sure you have the answer to this. Is there any stat in how many people have received the EIDL advance? Noah might have that stat.
I think Noah might. I don't.
Okay.
No, we haven't reporting on the EIDLs as of yet.
Okay.
I think I saw some kind of stat in a Wall Street Journal article today or yesterday, but if SBA doesn't have it, that's where they'd be getting it. So
yeah. Well, Anne, thanks again. Thanks
Thank
again
you
for coming on. I appreciate it. It's Friday. Happy Friday. Thanks for all the work you're doing in DC for us. And if anybody has any questions that they, any burning questions they want that they didn't get to ask, you can always email me. Putting my email into chat. And
so
I will, but Michael, we'll hold that question for a second there. But Anne, you want some closing words or?
I was just going to say, stay positive. Help is coming. It didn't come soon enough, but I think all of us who work with small businesses owe it to them to stay positive, to continue to believe that this will be helpful and that the Congress is working, that they are concerned, that they do hear you. And I just encourage everybody on the phone, if you haven't reached out to your congressional delegation, please do so, because constituent voices mean everything in this regard. Thanks very much. Happy weekend.
Thanks, Anne.
Thanks.
We have a couple of questions that we can address. Victoria, I'm not sure what you mean about the bridge loan, so if you can be a little bit more specific about that into chat. And Michael wants to know, is the California Disaster Relief Program limited only to existing clients of servicing lenders? I do not believe so. But there is, so basically a participating lender has to come up with a loan profile that they can put through the disaster relief program, and then it doesn't have to be an existing client. There are some people possibly on this call. I know there's some Cameo members who are either thinking about it or are participating already in the state loan guarantee program, the disaster program, and but they're not ready to accept applications yet as far as I'm concerned. So we're going to talk a little bit about that on Wednesday if we have information, but that might take a little longer to roll out. If anybody is on the phone and wants to pop any information on that they are doing lending, please do so into chat. And Victoria, I'm guessing you mean the express loans of up to 25K. Do we have Noah still there? Is that the SBA express loans, I'm guessing? Or?
Probably maybe talking about the Express Bridge Loan Program.
Yeah. Do you have any comments on that?
Only just to say that that program, similar to the PPP, is delivered by banking partners, many of whom have almost all of their capacity dedicated towards Paycheck Protection Program loans at the moment. And so in my conversations with business owners, the participating lenders who are issuing those, who would participate in that program, a lot of their capacity is dedicated towards Paycheck Protection Program loans at the moment.
So Damien has a question in the chat, but I'm going to hold off on that, and I'm going to turn it to Mark to tell us sort of what we could be doing and what should small business be doing. And I will share my screen just for a minute or two. Hold on 1 second. I'm going to move things around. And here we go with the screen share. There's all sorts of questions about PPP and EIDL. So Mark, let's start with, which is not on our slide, but let's start with the questions in here about the applicants who haven't heard back from PPP or EIDL, and let's take them separately. Because I think their PPP is done by a lender, EIDL is done by the SBA, and can people check their status and all sorts of things like that. So let's start there before we go into what we're going to be doing, what we could do from here on in. So
sure, and I'll also call on Noah for the things that he can speak to. It is definitely the case that there's a lot of backlog that is in the PPP side. I think the last couple of days, as soon as they announced or as soon as apparent that they were going to run through the money, there was definitely run on the program for dollars. And I think we probably did a run rate, I can't even imagine, probably $25 billion a day for the last couple of days there. So there's a lot of backlog of lenders who have gotten their loan numbers from SBA. In other words, an application that went in to SBA, got a loan number, and the lenders are in the process then of sorting through getting back to the borrowers about approvals. So assume that there's probably a backlog of applications that have gotten an SBA loan number, because the way the process works, of course, is that the loan application goes into the bank goes to SBA, gets a loan number, and when they get that loan number, then they can then go back to the borrower and let them know that they've been approved. But some of the numbers from the big banks, I've seen hundreds of thousands from folks from Chase, for example, that will take a while for everybody to be communicated back to, as far as the fact that they've gotten an approval from SBA. So the first thing is really to realize that if anybody who has a client that has applied for either one, they should be reaching out, especially to the PPP side, because you can do that. You can reach out to the lenders to see what the status might be, if that's been approved or not. The SBA side is more problematic, and I'll leave it to Noah if he thinks that the helpline can give you information about your status on your EIDL loan. That's going to be a little bit more of a challenge because the backlog and the pipeline there are, from my understanding, really, really long. Any sense on that, Noah?
I mean, timelines is the hot question of the day for the EIDL, which, there's not a great answer for, aside to say that the 1-800 number is, for that is the only place where an individual could get a update on where their application is. And I think could because it really depends on where they are in the process. If they're kind of, already had their advanced issued and are a little bit later in the underwriting process, I think that the folks in the 1-800 number have a little bit more visibility at that point. But especially if you haven't, received an advance yet, it's most of the folks at the 1-800 number can't pull up an application at that point in the process. In terms of backlog and average processing time, our SBDCs we're sharing. We don't have SBA numbers on averages for timing. This morning our SBDCs were reporting from their clients that they were seeing about 2 weeks or so for advances is what they were seeing on calendar days. I've been hearing anecdotally from business owners that it was around 10 business days. So those are, just some similar, straw poll tests, not official numbers for averages in any way for idle advances. And then in terms of timing on the loans themselves, there's, we're kind of in that first phase of applicants and we haven't put out reported numbers or timelines for those yet. But it is a really large, backlog, you're right, in terms of number of applicants.
If they haven't received an advance, does that mean the money's gone?
No, so for EIDL, those applications are still being processed on a first come, first served basis.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a discussion about like whether, yesterday new applications stopped being accepted. That's what happened yesterday.
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of applications in there in the system that have been going into the system since it opened.
Yes.
And these people now.
So applications in the pipeline are still being funded and they're still being processed, and those are actively going out still. There hasn't been a halt on processing of applications in the pipeline by any means.
Okay, and then so all the ones that are in the pipeline are still being considered, right? Okay, so we have they shouldn't lose hope there, right? Okay, that's good.
If I could jump in, because Noah shouldn't speak to this. The fact that they're in the pipeline does not mean necessarily that SBA has the funds to be able to fund all of those in the pipeline. When the funds ran out, because of anti-deficiency rules, SBA can't accept applications when there's no more funding for that. So the applications that are in, and as Noah says, are going to be processed. But that does not mean that there's sufficient funding to cover those. In fact, there's almost no question that there's not enough money to cover what's already in to start with on the EIDL side. So they'll process those through, and they will hold basically the approvals. They will basically hold those until SBA gets appropriations to be able to fund those, and then they will fund them probably in the order that they are received. But they will not be sent back. They will not be rejected. They will not be funded until there's funds to do that with. So the process typically is going to be the case that you're going to see a backlog of applications that have been approvable but can't get funded. And SBA will not be able to go back to those clients and tell them you're approved subject to funding, because that would indicate that we have already gone ahead and made an approval before we had an appropriation to do that with, which we can't do. So the answer probably is that people are going to feel as though they won't get any kind of an update on their status. At the same time, as Noah says, we're going to continue to review the applications that are in the pipeline already, just not accepting any new ones because we ran out of money. Is that your general understanding, Noah?
I think that's excellent context to put around what's, you know, kind of the current situation is. Yeah.
Okay, so anyone who hasn't applied yet, let's say they do get, let's say they do turn on the faucet again. Let's just do some, like a scenario, right? So let's say there's 100, I got the number 100,000 up there, 100,000 applications in the pipeline that haven't been funded because there's no money. So they're going to go through those 100,000 applications first, because they're the ones who got their applications in, because I heard first come, first served basis. And they're going to see whatever, and whatever the new appropriations is, they'll give that, do those loans according with the new appropriations. Is that right?
In general, I think that's probably correct, Heidi.
Okay.
The question really be about how much money is.
Yeah.
Well, SBA has not provided information on what's in the pipeline now, and there's a logical reason for that, because on EIDL loans, until those loans have been reviewed and approved and a dollar amount set, it's impossible to know how deep the backlog is in terms of how many dollars.
Right.
So the two things we don't know, amongst many other things at this point, is we don't know how much is going to be appropriated for EIDL, and we don't know how much EIDL is in the hole for right now in terms of how many applications are in and how many of those are funded at what level. So it's going to be still a little bit of an uncertainty on that. I think that one thing that is probably likely is that for the amount of money that's going to come in, the question will be whether it's going to be sufficient to cover both the in-house applications that are already in-house and accepting new applications, or it's just enough to cover what's already in-house. And that will be the question that will come up. So for any of the folks that are dealing with new applicants, as soon as and as quickly as they can, when the window gets open, people should get through the window and try to get their applications in, even if at that point in time the funding would not be sufficient even to cover the backlog that's already in-house. So that would be the first piece of that, just to keep in mind that there's still a huge backlog that's unfunded that is being processed right now. And when money will become available, it will be funded very quickly for that entire group. And so you don't want to see it be the case that people think that when a significant amount of EIDL money becomes available, that they can then take their time about applying. The truth is they should apply as soon as that's announced, and whether or not there's additional money beyond what's already in-house.
Okay.
Likewise, I would also add that so that for the PPP program, you know, if you think about how that program behaved over the past 2 weeks, it from over a 14-day period, starting from 0 applications submitted to a local lending institution, $350 billion were distributed under that program over that 14-day period, starting from 0. And subject to appropriation, you know, if additional funding is appropriated to that program, it will not be starting from 0 when it restarts, because many individuals already have put in applications to lenders, and those lenders some lenders may be holding a queue in case that happens, some may not, some, you know, but you know, that's on a lending institution by lending institution basis, but it won't be starting from 0 with banks figuring out how to get access to E-Tran and even submit the information over. It'll you know, not be a 14-day period, most likely.
Yeah, that's a good segue into kind of what should you guys tell your clients to do, and I'll turn it over to Mark, for that.
Yeah, let me just deal with the last piece that Noah alluded to. While there's not a backlog per se for the PPP loans within SBA, of course, because once those get funded, they're approved. And so SBA has essentially no idea how big the backlog is on the PPP side because it all is resident with lenders once they got cut off. But that all said, the run rate that we have that was probably running at about $25 billion a day for the last 4 or 5 days. I doubt that we have much more than a week's worth of funding at $251 billion that they're talking about. So my recommendation on that would be, while we're waiting, and it should be, from Ann's comments, it should be probably not past Monday, but while we're waiting, I'd say to suggest to lenders or to suggest to clients to go to their lenders, even if they have not yet submitted, and discuss with their lenders if they are ones that the lender would accept an application for. So this would be a little bit of a challenge and something that people need to do because we went through the discussion of people going to their lenders and finding out that their lenders wouldn't deal with non-customers or wouldn't deal with customers that didn't have the right facility, that didn't have the right lending facility. They might have had checking accounts, but not the right checking accounts. So it would be good to have folks go to their lender and say, yes, I know you can't accept an application now, but when you can accept an application, is my status something that you would submit for PPP? That way, when the window becomes open again, people then would have a sense that that would be something that they could submit for. So I would suggest that telling clients to try to see whether or not, reach out to the financial institution that you're working with. And I think there's a list that NOAA and SBA has put up on, and the SBDC has put up about some lenders that are willing to take clients that are not customers. And reaching out to those folks and saying, I would be interested in doing this once you are open to an application, at least try to make the contact even before the window becomes open. My concern would be that the window would be open and then shut so quickly that people wouldn't have the opportunity to get into the process. Once they're in the process, though, it doesn't mean anything about getting funded necessarily, but it does mean that your application would be submitted to an institution that if supplemental information or supplemental funding is happening, you would then be in a better position to get funded downstream. The 250 plus or minus billion they're talking about for PPP right now would seem to be probably about a quarter of what people are describing as what's necessary. So the expectation is that there'll be supplemental rounds of funding in addition to this one. So people need to continue to not be turned off by the idea that the funds are run out. The funds have temporarily been run out. They'll probably be renewed. But in the meantime, people need to look to go and find a lender or a partner that when the money becomes available, that they know that they could submit through.
Yeah, and there's a question if somebody to share that link. No, I don't know if you have that link of list of lenders that Mark alluded to. And I do know that Cameo members / friends who are doing it. I know Lendistry was taking applications, and I know that Funding Circle was taking applications.
Yeah, our office actually didn't. We don't have an active list of lenders that are currently in a taking new clients list, if only because that list was changing on an hourly daily basis for the past 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Initially we started putting one together and it became out of date.
It did immediately. Yeah.
CDC, a small business, is also taking applications.
And CDC is also taking applications. So they're whether or not they, so those are a couple, and I do we talked a little bit before about CDFIs and some of the money being pegged to CDFIs. So if you have a good relationship with some of the lenders, and I know there's some lenders on the phone here, on the line, if you're planning, if there's an allocation and you're planning on doing PPP, I'm guessing you've had some discussions about it within your thing and you want to type your name into the chat box. Yeah, Gladys is putting it concisely what I just said. So or you plan on taking applications, that would be helpful to post here too. COVID loan tracker. Thank you, Michael. Again, I would just want to make sure that we, check to see, make sure that we know who those lenders are. I don't know. I haven't seen that, who's on there. Just make sure it's a reputable lender.
Holly, hi. Heidi, it's Lamar Haystack with Asian Inc. I apologize. I just had another comment
Sure.
on what Mark said. And the issue is we should definitely know, the client should definitely know who the actual people are associated with their accounts. So I've been advising our folks that they need to actually know the business banker that they've been assigned, and the business banker needs to know who they are, because these are folks who are just account numbers on a balance sheet. And this is all being driven by relationships and by people. And if these people, our people, are not visible, then it's very difficult.
Yeah, it's a good point. I think one of the things that everybody should realize is that part of the reason we burned through $350 billion is that a lot of it went to the top four, banks, Bank of America, and it's not I'm not saying it in a bad way. Bank of America, Wells, and Chase and Citi, I guess, did some, but we went through a lot of the money through the big banks. The concern is that there's a lot of community banks and CDFIs and non-bank lenders that are eligible but didn't get into the process fast enough before it was vacuumed up by the bigger banks. So that being said, I think it would be good for us, Cameo, to reach out to the community advantage lenders in California to make sure that we know who is interested amongst the CA lenders to do PPP loans. And I know CDC, Small Business Finance, has been doing them, and others have as well, but that would be something that we should make sure that all the members know, at least that our Cameo community advantage lenders are in that mix. And then the other expectation is that the complaint from the community banker groups have been that they have also not been able to be fully participant in this. So it gets back to Lamar's comment about knowing who it is at your community bank. And the third challenge is really a lot of the credit unions who have been eligible. They're eligible to be in the PPP program, but they have not, in some cases, been able to do that. So keep in mind that there's some other folks out there that could be in this, but now after they see the money's run out, the likelihood is that they would be dissuaded from trying to pursue the entry into the program. And that's where some of the other players, like Lending Circle and others, Lendistry, could fill in some of those gaps.
Yeah, Mark, we did ask our Cameo members who do Community Advantage, and the only one that seems to be participating is CDC. So, sorry, I take that back. Sorry, FarmLink. And Lendistry. FarmLink, I take that back. FarmLink is taking PPP applications from farmers that are current borrowers and non-borrowers. So they're doing some ag lending. Sorry. So we kind of talked about point number one here on the slide. Banks have hundreds of thousands of applications where they're doing. Make sure, have your clients, like Lamar said, go in and talk to the bank. And another question to ask the bank is, when all systems are go, will they actually accept their application? So do some funding. And then Mark, what about and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. What should everybody be prepared with? And I can also pop a resource that is into the chat. That's a nice kind of how-to that I saw. So what should they be telling clients about their application besides asking questions to the banks?
Yeah, I mean, for the PPP side, the first thing is to go back and see what their status is. And in many cases, they would be either pending, or maybe they've gotten an okay from SBA, but they just haven't been informed. So the first thing is don't, tell the clients to try to see where the status is on their existing PPP loan. On the EIDL loan, it's going to be a little bit more problematic to get information from SBA, but if they've gotten a notification of a loan number that's in the system, they at least know that the application has been accepted by SBA. So that's the first thing, is really to send folks that are already applied, and I've heard of people who have applied a couple weeks ago to some of the big banks and still haven't heard anything. So the first thing is to really go back in and find out what the status of that is. That's the first thing. Then the second thing, I think your last point on that last bullet there, is about the sole proprietor, independent contractor, gig worker, 1099 types, that because they did not get into the system until late in the game, essentially after a week after this, many of those probably had, and also had some issues about trying to make sure they knew how to calculate their average monthly payroll, because it's different for a sole proprietor, self-employed person. So those folks, many of them have been frozen out of the system because they came into the game too late in the funding. So that group in particular needs to be reached out to and tried to work with, because calculating their average monthly salary by their by Schedule C's from their tax returns is really what SBA's guidance to the banks is saying that that's what they're looking for. So that would be, and not to go into the calculation there, but that would be something that people should be advising people, particularly since a lot of the clients of Cameo's nonprofits are sole proprietors or independent contractors. So trying to make sure that we get that group to be prepared to apply once funds become reavailable.
Great. Yeah, and I just posted into chat a link to a NAV article that tells you how to apply for the payroll protection plan if you're self-employed. So it was pretty easy to understand, and can use that as a basis, the starting point to work with your clients. It's 12:58, 2 minutes before 1.
Okay.
Does anybody have questions or comments or additional information?
Yeah, me neither.
Anybody? I think that was a private conversation. And oops, I forgot to mute myself. Lamar?
No, I just wanted to say, we're, getting back to the idea of where the list is of all the lenders, it really is a lot of detective work, not just to know what the universe is, but actually it's even like for us, we've gone on to LinkedIn and actually connected with lenders that way. And it's been really, really that kind of, sorry, I was cut off. It was like the personal relationships. And I think that people should really get the clients to hear from the bankers and to hear the news directly from the bankers, because it's easy to just get a mass message from, and I'm not just saying it's a bank, it could be non-bank lenders. So just lending institutions in general. So we're instructing folks to get that information directly from the bankers, and the bankers owe some kind of personal note to that, because if they're just invisible, it's just not going to make a difference. So I urge people to look on anywhere that they can, to take the SBA's master list and basically do their own detective work. That's what we've done. It's been very difficult, but if there's folks who need our assistance, we can try to help in limited cases to get people ready for those lenders who are ready to accept another round of applications.
And Lamar, are you only working in San Francisco, or can you help people outside San Francisco?
We're helping people well outside of San Francisco. Certainly the bulk of it is folks who are limited English proficient in San Francisco, in Oakland, but we are helping people north, south, not very farther west, but certainly east. And so, yeah, it's about relationships. So we're trying to create relationships, but there are none. But yeah, I'm happy to help.
And what are your language? You say, I heard you say non-English speaker, so non-native. Do you have
We're doing Cantonese, Mandarin, Vietnamese, and Spanish. Okay. And English as well. So
I know a lot of people on the call are doing, probably working in Spanish. I see Carmen. I'm sure she's giving some help. But Carmen, I think you're probably limited to your area. You probably have enough work to do.
And we all have more than enough, right? But it's really where we're going to have to dig deep.
Yeah.
I mean, speaking for our organization, Asian Inc., we have to dig deep and help people where we don't have capacity, just because it's just
Yeah. So with that, I just want to address the one last question that's in the chat, and then I'm happy to stay on, but I'll officially end the meeting. The PUA, the unemployment, and the PPP for independent contractors. So we just talked about the PPP for independent contractors, Adriana. That article I posted in the blog from NAV will help you calculate that. You need to find a lender just like anybody else. They are eligible. They should get a relationship with a bank. The Cameo members that are accepting PPP loans seem to be CCC, Lendistry, CDC, Small Business Finance, Lendistry, and if they're a farmer, FarmLink. If there are any more lenders on the call that are accepting those, please, I think I've made several pleas to let us know. The unemployment stuff, I think one of the best resources for that would be to go to the Freelancers Union, and they can, there's some good pieces on that for the 1099s. So are there any other, I'm happy to stay on. Mark, I'm guessing, is happy to stay on. Noah, thanks for joining us unofficially, officially. If not, you know, feel free to go have a Friday afternoon or do whatever it is that you're, you know, get back to work, as Lamar said. But thanks for everybody for joining. Everybody give yourself a big pat on the back. You're doing amazing work. And really appreciate everybody. And if there's anything else that you want us to, you know, if you want us to do some training on something, let us know. We're happy to entertain things, happy to try and pull resources together, even if we are not the expertise. We have a lot of fingers and lots of pots and can bring people in. Just keep on keeping on. And I don't see any, hear any. I'll let, if anybody, I'll shut up so anybody can unmute themselves and chime in. If not, I will end the meeting. So I'm going to say goodbye unless we hear some more people who want to chime in.
Just to clarify, what I was asking is because in the interim for independent contractors under PPP, it just says that it may affect them applying for PUA. So just if we had more specifics about that.
Okay, that's a good. I'll look into that. For I see. So does PPP affect your application for unemployment?
It may, but it didn't. It wasn't too clear on if we should just say do not apply, right?
Noah, do you know anything about that?
Well, that's ultimately a kind of a decision by the EDD in general. For unemployment, any income that an individual is receiving while collecting unemployment needs to be reported, and benefits are adjusted accordingly. But the PUA is a new program, and you know, I really just defer to EDD in terms of how they're implementing it.
Okay, I've been in conversations with the EDD, so, and we're going to do something on that on Wednesday. Did I say Wednesday or Thursday? Thursday, so I'll make sure I have more clarification and try and get the answer more specifically out before that in some of our communications, email communications.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep. No. These are exactly the kind of questions we want, so in clarification we can try and help you get. So. All right, for those of you still on the phone, I'm going to take a deep breath. Let it go and say, have a great weekend. Thank you very much. And I am going to end the meeting. Oh,
One other thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Lamar. I saw you unmute yourself.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
The way, I mean, this is my perspective. I mean, people don't have to agree. But the way people vote in an economy is with their dollars and cents. And we have to reward those community institutions, be they Cameo members or non-Cameo members, who have come through for our people. And if our people need to become visible elsewhere, so be it. I'm not discouraging people from like sticking with their institutions if they've come through for them before, but this is really where the rubber meets the road. We got to put our money where it works for our people. That's all I have to say. I'll get off my soapbox. Have a good day.
No, I agree. There needs some system change. I'm a big fan of public banking, so that
I
would,
said that to the board of supervisors. We talked about it with
yeah.
the public bank.
Yep, that I'm a big fan. I mean, that's a long-term solutions, but yeah, I don't disagree with you there. So great. Happy weekend, everybody. Happy Friday. Take care.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.